I did everything right. That's what still confuses me. I didn't rebel. I didn't self-destruct. I didn't make reckless decisions that ruined my future. I chose carefully, responsibly, logically. Every major decision in my life passed through a filter of reason. Is this stable? Is this safe? Is this the smart move? I learned early that good choices lead to good lives. So I became very good at choosing correctly. I listened when people with experience spoke. I avoided unnecessary risks. I didn't chase things that felt uncertain or emotional. I told myself that passion fades, but structure lasts. And for a long time, that belief worked. My life progressed in neat lines. Education led to work. Work led to stability. Stability led to approval. People looked at my life and nodded. You're doing well. You're on the right path. You've built something solid. I absorbed those words quietly, like confirmation that I was living properly. I didn't feel unhappy. That's important. I felt reasonable. My days made sense. My choices were defensible. Nothing was falling apart. But something wasn't growing either. I noticed it only in small moments. When I achieved something I had planned for years and felt nothing lasting. When I reached milestones that were supposed to mean something and moved past them immediately. When I asked myself what I wanted next and had no answer that didn't sound borrowed. I told myself this was adulthood. That satisfaction was a childish expectation. Real life, I believed, was about minimizing regret. So I kept choosing the option least likely to cause problems. If a door felt uncertain, I didn't open it. If a desire felt inconvenient, I dismissed it. If a dream couldn't be justified logically, I postponed it indefinitely. Postponement felt harmless. After all, I wasn't saying no forever. Just not now. Just not yet. Yet slowly, my life became a collection of later. Later I'll explore that. Later I'll take a risk. Later I'll allow myself something more. Later became my favorite word. It kept everything possible without requiring commitment. I didn't realize that by refusing to choose wrongly, I was also refusing to choose deeply. Depth carries risk. Meaning carries exposure. I had optimized my life for correctness, not truth. There was a moment quiet, unremarkable when this started to unravel. I was sitting alone one evening, reviewing my plans for the next few years. They were detailed. Achievable. Sensibly sequenced. And suddenly, a question appeared that I had never seriously asked myself before. If I follow this plan perfectly, who do I become? Not what do I get? Who do I become? I couldn't answer. Not because I lacked imagination. But because the plan wasn't designed to shape a person. It was designed to avoid mistakes. I realized then that my life had been built around avoidance. Avoiding instability. Avoiding judgment. Avoiding regret. But avoiding regret is not the same as creating meaning. I began to notice how often I justified my choices by saying they were the right ones. Right according to who? Society. Family. Common sense. Not me. I had learned to distrust my own impulses. Impulses are messy. They don't always lead somewhere safe. So I replaced them with logic. Logic never embarrassed me. Never disappointed anyone. Never asked uncomfortable questions. But logic also never made my heart race. Never surprised me. Never asked me to risk becoming someone else. I realized that I had built a life that couldn't really hurt me. And because of that, it also couldn't really reach me. I wasn't dissatisfied. I was untouched. I began to feel a strange form of grief. Not grief for what I had lost. But for what I had never allowed to happen. For the versions of myself that never existed because they were too risky to justify. I saw how often I had chosen certainty over curiosity. And how that choice, repeated enough times, becomes a cage that looks like success. I didn't feel trapped. I felt complete in the worst way. Finished. As if my life had already decided what it would never be. That thought unsettled me deeply. Because I realized something terrifying. You don't need to make bad choices to lose your life. Sometimes, all it takes is making only the right ones. Once the idea settled that my life might be correct but hollow, I tried to reject it. I told myself I was being ungrateful. That many people would want exactly what I had. That questioning a stable life was indulgent. Those arguments were convincing. They were also familiar. Whenever doubt appeared, I treated it like a malfunction. Something to suppress. Something to outgrow. I reminded myself of the risks I had avoided. I hadn't failed publicly. Hadn't embarrassed myself chasing impossible dreams. Hadn't wasted years on something that didn't work. From the outside, my restraint looked like wisdom. From the inside, it began to feel like fear with good manners. I started noticing how often I described my past in terms of safety rather than meaning. I was proud that nothing had gone terribly wrong. But I struggled to name anything that had gone deeply right. My memories were orderly, chronological, predictable. Few of them surprised me. I noticed how other people spoke about their lives. They talked about moments when everything could have fallen apart. Times when they didn't know who they would become. Periods that changed them permanently. Those stories carried intensity. Mine carried explanations. I could explain every decision I had made. I just couldn't explain why any of them mattered to me. That gap grew harder to ignore. I began to see how my caution had shaped my identity. I was dependable. Reasonable. Low risk. People trusted me because I was unlikely to disrupt anything. But that trust came with an unspoken assumption. I would not surprise anyone, including myself. I realized how often I chose paths that required the least internal negotiation, paths that didn't force me to confront desire. Or disappointment. Or the possibility of being wrong. I had confused emotional neutrality with maturity. But neutrality, sustained long enough, becomes absence. I felt that absence most strongly when I imagined the future. Not fear emptiness. The future looked like a continuation of what already was. More refinement. More stability. More proof that I was doing things properly. And almost no sense of becoming. That realization shook me. Because I had always believed the future would naturally bring growth. I was doing everything right. Shouldn't growth be guaranteed? I finally admitted something that felt almost forbidden. My life felt finished before it was lived. Not ended, finalized. As if I had already closed all the doors I wasn't supposed to walk through. I started noticing moments of quiet envy. Not of success, of courage. I envied people who had chosen paths that didn't make sense at the time. Who had lived with consequences instead of guarantees. Who had let life change them, even when it hurt. I told myself they were reckless. But the envy remained. I realized that by always choosing what was reasonable, I had insulated myself from transformation. Transformation requires uncertainty. It requires the possibility of regret. I had spent my life trying to avoid regret. In doing so, I had created a different kind. Regret for a life never risked. That regret felt strange. It wasn't tied to a single moment. It was cumulative. Built from hundreds of small, sensible decisions that added up to a life that felt emotionally distant. I saw how often I had said no without ever feeling the weight of it. No to opportunities that felt impractical. No to impulses that couldn't be explained. No to choices that would have forced me to become visible in a new way. Each no felt harmless. Together, they formed a pattern of self-erasure. I began to understand that right is not a neutral category. Right according to rules. Right according to expectations. Right according to fear of making a mistake. I had been loyal to an invisible judge. And that judge had no interest in whether I felt alive. There was a moment late at night when this crystallized painfully. I imagined myself years later, looking back on this life. Not with anger. With indifference. As if I were reviewing someone else's careful decisions. That image frightened me more than failure ever had. Failure would have meant I tried. This meant I never fully entered. I felt a moral tension then. If I questioned my choices now, I would have to admit they were incomplete. That correctness had cost me something real. If I didn't question them, I could continue comfortably. And never know who I might have been. Both options hurt. But only one involved honesty. I realized then that the danger of always choosing right is not that you end up miserable. It's that you end up untouched, unchanged, unlived. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The question was no longer whether my life looked good. It was whether it felt like mine. The first wrong choice I made didn't look dramatic from the outside. There were no raised voices. No irreversible consequences. No visible collapse. It was simply a decision that couldn't be fully justified. And that terrified me. I had lived my entire life inside explanations. Every choice had a reason that could be defended, repeated, approved. This one didn't. It didn't make sense on paper. It didn't maximize safety. It didn't guarantee progress. It only answered one question I had ignored for years. Do I want this? I noticed how foreign that question felt in my body. Desire had always been suspect to me. Unreliable. Emotionally biased. I had trained myself to override it. So when I finally listened to it even briefly, I felt exposed. As if I had stepped outside without armor. The choice didn't fix my life. It complicated it. It introduced uncertainty where there had been none. It created conversations I couldn't control. It forced me to explain myself without the usual confidence. People reacted differently. Some were confused. Some were supportive. Some questioned my judgment. That reaction alone was new. For the first time, my life didn't make immediate sense to everyone. And for the first time, that didn't feel like failure. It felt like movement. I realized then that right choices had insulated me not only from risk, but from accountability to myself. As long as I chose correctly, I never had to ask whether the choice was honest. Correctness had been my shield. Without it, I felt vulnerable and strangely awake. I began noticing how my internal language changed. I stopped saying, "This is the logical thing to do," and started saying, "This matters to me." That sentence carried weight. Not certainty weight. Because it placed responsibility where it belonged. On me. There were moments of panic. Times when I questioned everything. Wondered if I had made a mistake. Missed the comfort of predictability. But something important had shifted. Even doubt felt different. It was mine. I understood then that safety is not the same as security. Safety protects you from harm. Security comes from knowing you are living truthfully. I had been safe for years. I had not been secure. My life hadn't collapsed when I stepped off the right path. It became uneven. Less polished. More demanding. But it also became responsive. My choices mattered again. They carried consequences, not theoretical ones, but lived ones. And lived consequences shape you. I stopped feeling finished. That was the greatest relief. Finished lives don't change. They don't surprise you. They don't require courage. I realized how much energy I had spent maintaining an image of correctness. Letting that go freed space. Space for curiosity. For risk. For being wrong and learning from it. I learned that regret isn't born from bad choices alone. It's born from unmade ones, from lives spent inside what's acceptable instead of what's true. I didn't suddenly become reckless. I became honest. And honesty is not reckless. It's demanding. It asks you to stand behind your choices without hiding behind approval. I stopped asking whether my life looked good from the outside. I started asking whether I could feel myself inside it. That question changed how I moved through everything. Work. Relationships. Time. I became more selective. Not because I wanted more control. But because I understood the cost of drifting through decisions that didn't engage me. I didn't recover the years spent choosing only what was right. Those years are gone. But I stopped adding more to them. That, I learned, is its own form of redemption. If you're listening to this and something resonates, hear this clearly. You can do everything right and still lose yourself. You can avoid every mistake and still miss your life. Correctness is not a substitute for meaning. And safety is not a substitute for presence. I made all the right choices. And still lost my life. Not because I chose badly. But because I chose without ever asking who those choices were for. The moment I allowed myself to choose without guarantees, without approval, without a perfect explanation. My life didn't become easier. It became mine. And that ownership, imperfect, risky, unfinished, is the only thing that has ever made my life feel real. I don't know where this path leads. But for the first time, I'm not following it because it's right. I'm following it because I'm there. And being there fully, consciously, honestly, is the only choice I wish I had made sooner.